in May 2017. We had said that crossing such a red line would immediately elicit a response. We have noted the blockage in the Security Council. We have therefore acted in line with our statements, in line with our responsibility, and in coordination with our allies. The regime of Assad has deliberately chosen to break the taboo since the beginning of the 20th century regarding the use of chemical weapons. For 7 years, he has violated international standards in contravention with humanity and the rules of engagement in a war. The chemical escalation in Syria is unacceptable. It is unacceptable because the use of chemical weapons violates a fundamental standard of humanitarian and international law. The use of terror weapons violates some of the most ancient conventions, the 1925 protocol, which prohibits the use in war of chemical weapons. It violates the international convention forbidding the use of chemical weapons in 1973, which Damascus signed up to in 1973. The manufacturing and the use of such weapons is a threat to international peace and stability, and also those who violate this are banning themselves from civilized debate. Chemical weapons are unacceptable. The Syrian regime had committed to dismantling its arsenal of chemical weapons. In September 1973, the Security Council had passed a vote that Syria should abide by this resolution. Otherwise, it would be punished under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, the recourse to military methods to fight against those who are threatening international peace and stability. The chemical escalation in Syria is unacceptable because since the statements made by the President of the Republic, everybody was made aware of the consequences of any violation of the Syrian government's commitments. The regime of Bashar al-Assad knew what it was exposing itself by again using these odious weapons against its people by deliberately choosing to challenge international law. The action undertaken by our armed forces, I would like to pay tribute to their professionalism and their calm determination in the service of France. Madam the Minister of the Army, Mrs. Parly, will give more details in a few moments. This legitimate action aims to put an end to a serious violation of the law. It is limited to specific targets, the destruction of the Syrian regime's chemical capabilities to prevent it from continuing to use chemical weapons in the service of its strategy of terror against its own population. This action is proportional and targeted. It is not aimed at Assad's allies or the civilian population, but it aims to dissuade the Syrian regime from continuing in the same way. The Syrian and Damascus regime must cease using such weapons. For 7 years, the war in Syria has been getting worse and worse. It directly affects the security of France and Europe. In this context, we have two priorities: the fight against jihadist groups, notably Daesh, and a return to stability, which calls for political solutions. This alone can restore peace and security for the Syrian people. This alone can restore security in the region and for the international community. For this reason, France will be taking political initiatives very quickly. We have 3 priorities. First of all, to dismantle the Syrian chemical program in a verifiable and irreversible way. Secondly, at the same time, a ceasefire, to obtain a ceasefire across the whole of Syria and to allow humanitarian aid to reach the population in line with the resolutions of the Security Council, which is binding on everybody and has not been obeyed. And finally, at the same time, a crisis exit strategy with a political solution must be worked on from now on with all the countries that may contribute to it. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening at 3 a.m. Paris time, on the order of the President of the Republic, the French armies, in coordination with the US and British armies, carried out an operation in Syria. This operation aimed to target the clandestine, the unofficial chemical facilities, the main center of research, and 2 major production sites were struck by bombs, were bombed. Through these objectives, through these targets, we wish to reduce the capacity of Syria to develop, to produce chemical weapons which they have been using. The aim is very simple: to prevent the regime from once again using chemical weapons. In practical terms, this operation has combined naval and airborne resources. Multi-mission frigates, supported by protection and support vessels, have been deployed in the Mediterranean Sea. At the same time, an air raid was organized at the beginning of the night. They took off from several air bases in France in order to reach Syria. These resources attacked in a coordinated way. They launched cruise missiles in perfect synchronization with our US and British allies. The infrastructures targeted were those used to develop and produce the substances used to kill men and women and children in Syria, Syrian men, women and children, in contravention of all civilized and legal standards. We are not seeking a confrontation. We refuse to indulge in any escalation in military activity. For this reason, with our allies, we have been taken care of informing the Russians beforehand. A precise analysis of the results of the bombing will be announced in the next few hours. France is resolutely committed within the international coalition in its fight against the Islamic State in the Levant. I would like to thank our US and British allies, and notably our counterparts, Williamson and Mattis, with whom I have been in close touch every evening this week, so that this operation can be conducted successfully. Finally, may I pay tribute to the professionalism, the rigor, the courage of the men and women of the French armed forces who have contributed to the good execution of this very complex operation. Thank you.